So very warm welcome to everybody. The highest in me bows to the highest in you. And it's the occasion of Independence Day in India, 15th of August. It's a public holiday. So I thought, why not invite everybody to practice a little bit more? And we're very fortunate today to have with us Michael Bresnan, who's joining us from the US. And I'll briefly introduce Michael. And then if he'd like to share anything else about himself or about uh, today, then he's welcome to do that. So Michael is a long-time Mahasati teacher and practitioner. He's been practicing Lungpo Tien's Dhamma with Lungpo Tien's Dhamma heirs, Ajahn Thong, Ajahn Kamkhen, Ajahn Da, and others for over 30 years. He started his Buddhist practice with Chan Master Cheng Yen, but switched to Mahasati when he met these Thai monks. He verified his practice for himself under their guidance and subsequently founded the Centers for Mindfulness and Insight Meditation in Connecticut and Massachusetts for the practice and teaching of Mahasati meditation. Thai monks Ajahn Da and Ajahn Nipen live in residence at the Connecticut Center. And I connected with Michael through one of the websites of these Center for Mindfulness. And I had a chance to actually speak with him quite a lot, and he was very generous with his time. And I spoke to him quite a lot in detail. And that actually is one of the things that motivated me to actually start this 30-hour Mahasati initiative. And Michael, this is the second batch. We've had one batch before this, and this is the second batch of people who have signed up to practice for 30 hours. And on most days, we practice in the morning and in the evening. Of course, not everyone joins live, but they can watch the recording. And so we've had a pretty motivated group, and I would say at least 70 plus, more than 70 people have actually completed 30 hours, and a lot more than that have completed 15 hours. And all kinds of experiences have been shared, and people have had different kinds of shifts. And we have people here from all over the world, mostly from India, but also from the US, from the UK, Australia, different parts of Europe, and yeah, maybe some other countries that I'm missing as well. Sri Lanka, and we have one person from Sri Lanka as well, I think. So we have a pretty diverse group here, and not all of them are necessarily meditators before this, or even Buddhist for that matter, but they've taken to the practice with a lot of enthusiasm. And I'd now like to hand it over to you and invite you to guide us.
Thank you, Nitya, for inviting me to join you, and to all of you for allowing me to be here with you virtually and practice with you. And I think it's wonderful that you organize this event. It's so important that we encourage each other to practice, and I think this seems like such an amazing way to encourage practice. So I'm quite impressed, and looking forward to sharing a little bit of time with you. And of course, happy Independence Day to everyone in India. I don't know. My thought was I have to leave the Zoom at in about an hour and a half. So my thought was that maybe we can practice first for an hour, and then I can share some reflections on Mahasati practice, and then we can have maybe a discussion, and I'll follow Nitya's lead on how to sort of facilitate that, make that happen. But again, very grateful to be with you all. This practice has changed my life. It's wonderful to see it being taken up by others, and yeah, that's the best thing in the world as far as I'm concerned. So why don't everybody knows how to practice, right, Nitya? They know, yeah. So why don't we practice for an hour? And then well, at 8 o'clock my time, it's hard for me to do the math in reverse.
I'll take care of the time. I'll invite them to. I'll switch. That's all.
All right. Thank you.
Great. Wonderful. And Michael, in between, this is something that I do. I don't know if you want to do that. In between, if you just want to offer people slight reminders, but even though everyone knows the practice, most of them are quite new. So any slight reminders you want to share with them during the practice, please feel free to guide them as you like.
Oh, sure. So, just as we start, for you all, or the people in India anyway, it's the start of your day. For people in the West, it's the end of the day, right? And typically, people have been spending the day caught up in their own minds, caught up in thought, worried about things outside of themselves. So when we begin this practice, we're turning awareness back towards our own body and mind. And we start with the body because it is easier to see than the mind. It's doesn't move as quickly as the mind moves. So we start by just being aware of the feeling of the body as it moves. Not focusing too hard on it, but just being aware of the feeling that arises when the body and the arms move, when the hands move, when they stop moving. And when we have a little bit of stability, it doesn't have to be perfect, but when we have a little bit of stability, we open up the scope of awareness a bit more to notice what's happening in the mind as the body moves. So when the mind tries to think a thought, we see that it's trying to think a thought. But we don't pay attention to the story the mind is trying to tell us. We just see that it's thinking a thought, and we come back to the feeling of the body as a way to not lose ourselves in the narrative that the thought is trying to convey to us. And we're just attending to the phenomena that is rising and passing away from moment to moment in the body and mind without following after any of it. We're just noticing what's arising and then letting it go. And each time we notice that we're lost in thought, we simply come back to the feeling of the body as it moves. So each time we find that awareness has gone into thought, we simply come back to the body without trying to push the thought away, without any judgment towards ourselves or our practice. Tien said that the more the mind thinks and we know it and come out of it, the more we learn. The practice is simply once you recognize that awareness is inside the narrative of the thought, we just come back to the body and notice how the thought then drops away when we're no longer inhabiting it. being aware in a very light and easy way. Not even thinking that I'm aware of my body or I'm aware of my mind. Just allowing the sensations that are arising in the body, the phenomena that's arising in the mind, just allowing it to be seen. It doesn't need to be a subject.
So if anyone would like to take a short break, we'll meet again in a few minutes, and Michael will be giving us a Dhamma talk and taking some of your questions. If you want to put your questions in the chat, you can do so now or a little later. And I think we'll take the question in the chat first, and then if anybody wants to ask something, you can also unmute them. So go ahead. If you need a break, please take a break. And if you need to stretch your legs, drink some water. And Michael, that includes you. If you need a short break, please take a break. And we'll meet back in a few minutes. All right, Michael, please go ahead.
Thank you, Nitya. I think it's so appropriate that Nitya made Independence Day a special day of practice. India is, of course, celebrating its liberation from the oppression of colonial rule. And similarly, we come together to work for liberation. Liberation from greed, from anger, delusion, from sorrow, stress, anxiety, and fear. Liberation from the tyranny of concocting thought and ultimately even death itself. And I think my knowledge of Indian history is shallow, but everybody's heard of the story, around the world of the way that India achieved its independence. And I think what's remarkable is that it was done in a largely nonviolent way. And the whole world knows the story of Mahatma Gandhi. And, of course, he's inspired many other workers for social change around the world to follow his method of nonviolent social protest. So India was liberated not by killing the oppressor, but by ceasing to go along with the oppression and by bringing the oppression into the light of day for the whole world to see. And our fight for our own personal liberation has to follow the same tactic. This is the tactic of Mahasati Insight Meditation. It's a non-violent approach to liberation. I think, when people first turn to some type of meditation practice, they feel anger or a deep aversion towards the oppressor, and which is the concocting thoughts and emotions that torment them, and they naturally start out trying to kill the oppressor. And in this case, by trying to suppress thought, trying to suppress their feelings through concentration. But this approach doesn't really work, because when one returns to daily life, those thoughts and emotions just come rushing back in for us. So, Gandhi's tactic was not to try to crush Great Britain, but to simply refuse to go along with its rule, and to do so in a way that brought the oppression into the full light of day. And in much the same way, freedom from thought is achieved not by trying to destroy thought, but by seeing it each time it happens and simply not following after it. Each time thought arises, we see it, and instead of following after it, like we had been doing all our lives, we simply return to being aware of the body. So it's important we don't try to stop thought or prevent it from re-arising. Instead, like Gandhi, we just see it, but we don't pay attention to what it's telling you. Right? Thought is always coming up, and it's saying, be angry, be sad, be fearful, be stressed. We learn to sort of allow thought to be brought up and to be seen, but we don't follow its dictate anymore, right? We just come back, we see it, we don't have to push it away, we just ignore the story it's trying to tell us and come back to the body. And don't worry that it keeps coming up. We just see it and keep coming out of it again and again. So this is the practice. This is the non-violent path to liberation. Just as Britain was unable to sustain its rule when its actions were brought into the light of the day for the world to see, so too the defilements can no longer rule over us when they're seen by sati sampajana, or mindfulness and full awareness. But our civil disobedience towards the defilements and concocting thought must be as continuous as possible. If we try to sort of bring them to light and refuse to follow up after them for 1 hour a day, and then blindly follow their rule for the other 23 hours, we're not going to win our freedom that way. And this is, I think, the great strength of Mahasati meditation practice, is that we don't define practice as sitting still with our eyes closed. We allow the body to move and the mind to try to generate thought. The practice is simply being aware of each movement of the body and mind as best we can. And when we forget ourselves and get lost in the story of a thought, in a non-violent manner, we just become aware of the body once more. We don't try to stop the thought or shut it off. We just turn our head to look at the body, So in a very sort of gentle but determined practice. So this is really, I believe, the only way to find true freedom. Of course, there's nothing magic about these hand movements that we do in this practice, and it's obviously possible to know nibbana through the practice of mindfulness of the breath and sitting meditation, but having an awakening experience on its own doesn't fully liberate you. One must have awareness of the body and mind in daily life also. To be unaware what the body and mind are doing is the definition of ignorance or delusion. So even if you have this wonderful enlightenment experience, if you still go through the day unaware of what your body and mind is doing, you're still subject to delusion and ignorance. So, and finally, just as Gandhi demonstrated a kind of patient persistence in his work for freedom, we also must be patient in our practice of civil disobedience towards the defilements. In the beginning, it probably feel like nothing is changing, but over time it does, and it will. The defilements will not be able to sustain their rule because they can only do that in the dark. And just as there are milestones in India's fight for independence, there are also milestones in this work, in our work for freedom. It will seem like nothing is changing for a while, but then something will change as we arrive at a different stage of practice. So, for instance, when the stage of Rup Nam is realized, mindfulness will clearly see thought as phenomena without entering into it. And awareness of the body and mind will become much easier and no longer feel frustrating or tedious. When we know the stage of Paramat, we become clearer and clearer about how suffering arises in the mind until we eventually arrive at the profound truth of the Dhamma. So this is the path, and it's we see different. There are different stages that we come to naturally, and we understand different aspects of this whole edifice of suffering that the mind creates. But throughout the whole process, it's just continually just observing the body and mind, because the truth of our life that is without suffering is already there. The emptiness of our mind and body and the phenomena is already there. We just have to sort of bring it into the light of day. I'm a psychologist, and one of the fathers of Western psychology is Sigmund Freud. I'm not a huge fan of Sigmund Freud, but his mantra basically was make it the unconscious conscious. Right? He believed that but what he meant was repressed memories and traumas. That if we make what's unconscious conscious, they no longer have a hold on us. And that is the basic sort of tenet of the practice for liberation too. When what is unconscious becomes conscious, the mind naturally releases it. So it's a very simple and direct and gentle way to practice, but very powerful as well. So anyway, I guess I want to leave plenty of time to see what kind of questions people have, but again, happy Independence Day, and may we all bring the spirit of Gandhi to our own sort of efforts for liberation.
Thank you, Michael. Very inspiring to hear how you've connected India's struggle for freedom, nonviolent approach to freedom with this practice. Really appreciate that. I'd like to ask the most popular question first, and I can see some questions are repeated by many people, so I'll start with those. So one very common question is about doing the practice with eyes closed or eyes open. Some of them noticed that you had your eyes closed for some of the time. And they're asking, what is your advice on eyes being closed versus eyes being open? Someone says, is it so important to do it with open eyes? Because I like it. I find it a lot easier to do with closed eyes. That's one popular question.
Yeah, so it may have looked like my eyes were closed is because they were just I was looking downward or something, but they don't have to be open. They don't have to be open. The main point is not making your practice contingent on having your eyes closed. So in generally, I have my eyes open. So I'm. We go through our life with our eyes open, and we go through our life with our body moving, and to really change the mind, to really sort of be able to disassemble the edifice of suffering, we need continuity of practice. It's the most important thing. And because, I and most of us are probably lay people, we're not, monks, we can't go live in a cave, like I know some Tibet practitioners, they go to a cave for like 3 years or something. I can't do that. I need to practice in my life. And so we need a way of practicing that it can be done anytime. Whether you're at the office, whether you're riding on a bus or in your car, walking across the room, our body and mind are always there. They're always doing something. Be aware of what they're doing.
Another popular question is, they noticed that your hand movements were a little different from mine. So they're wondering if you can zoom out a bit and show us your hand movements, but they're different. So that was a popular question. They wanted to see how you were doing your hand movement. So is it possible for you to change your camera angle and to show it to them?
Yeah, I was doing it the same as you all, I think. I got to get further from the camera, I guess. I was doing it the same way you're all doing it. It's just a distortion probably of the angle. And I folded my hand down. I guess you can't see that. Yeah. But it looked like I could relate to what everybody was doing. I think I'm doing it the same. Yeah.
All right. Then there's a question about how do you integrate this practice with your clients in psychotherapy practice? One question.
Well, I think psychotherapy is different than this. So when we're doing this practice, we are seeing that thought arises, and thought is always trying to convey some sort of story or narrative. And in this practice, we just see thought as just a phenomena. We don't pay attention to the story, and we just come back. Because, we're already very good at attending to the story. That's what we've done all our life. So we don't need to practice that. We're already really good at it. What we're not good at is seeing that this thought is just a phenomenon that's happening in the mind. It's not who I am or the gospel truth. It's just a phenomenon that's happening. It's part of my present moment experience, and I don't have to follow the story if I don't want. And on the other hand, in daily life, we need a narrative to live our daily life. We have a name, we have a job, we have a role we play, we have relationships. There is a narrative, that is necessary to live a coherent life. And I see therapy as helping people sort of be curious about what kind of narrative are they creating for themselves, and is that narrative allowing them to be happy, to function well in the world, or is it a self-defeating narrative? So when we do psychotherapy, we're sort of looking at the story that people are telling themselves and being curious about it and saying, "Oh, how did you come up with that story?" And is that way of creating a narrative for your life, is that feel good? Does it help you live your life? With this practice, we're simply learning to see that it is just a story. We're learning to recognize it as a story, that it's not, that we ourselves are sort of creating it. And so I think the two things go hand in hand. There's in the therapy, we're helping people sort of have a more sort of coherent sort of sense of self and everything. And in this practice, we're seeing that it's just a story. It's not really true. And they support each other, because the more we see that it's just a story, the lighter we carry these things. But of course, if somebody has anxiety or something like that, I use mindfulness as a way to come out of the thoughts of the future and just come back to the present moment. I mean, of course, that's an important thing to do. But
so I'm going to combine two questions. Do you incorporate the sleepy movements? The sleepy movement that I taught them this the thing that Nongpotian teaches when you're sleepy to do that. Do you incorporate sleepy movements in walking practice? And the other question is, do you make any small movements, mini movements during the day? So can you show us what are the mini movements that you might be doing during the day? These are the two questions I'm combining.
Yeah, I mean, I know this movement. I don't do it that often. I don't. I think it resonates with certain people, and if it's helpful, use it. There's nothing. The actual movement itself isn't that important. We do this just because it's a tradition, and we don't have to think about it. We're just giving the body a job to do. It doesn't require any thoughts, and we just watch the body and mind going about their business. For me, I mean, sleepiness isn't so much of a problem. Sleepiness is a problem because the mind turns it into a problem. So the tiredness is just a sensation in the body and mind, and where it becomes a problem is when the mind starts saying, "Oh my God, I got to keep practicing for another hour," and I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it, and that's the dukkha, suffering. But the actual sensation is not so. It's just an unpleasant sensation. During the day, I do think movement is. I agree with Lampertin and all the other teachers and Ashanda that the kind of movement of the body is a way to kind of stimulate our awareness and remind us to keep paying attention. So during the day, I might let me see. I might just flip my hand up like this a little bit, or rubbing your fingers together. Shanda does that a lot. So just whatever, any kind of simple sort of repetitive movement can be helpful just to remind you to keep paying attention.
Thank you. The next question is, can you share your perspective on experiencing resistance within the practice? How to not pay attention to it, especially when it can be so heavy at times?
Resistance in what sense?
Maybe, Shweta, do you want to raise your hand? I can unmute you, then you can clarify. Do you know how to raise your hand? Let me look for you. There you are. Okay, one second. Why don't you ask Shweta? Go ahead.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Again, the resistance of, the mind will create a lot of stories of like, is this really doing anything or worth it? Or you feel like there's a feeling of like heaviness. And, I just keep on going at it, but the thickness sometimes can feel very heavy and thick. So if I term it as resistance. So it doesn't happen all the time, and I've been doing the practice since Nityaji started this. So some days it's just can feel unbearable and some days it's fine, and so not that I want to analyze it, but I do feel like there are times where I just want to quit, some days and some sessions.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and that is kind of an important sort of obstacle that we all need to kind of learn how to negotiate and move past. So that feeling that, oh, this is so heavy, this is so hard, this isn't doing anything. That of course is all thoughts, right? It's all thoughts that the mind is thinking, and people, I think, often get stuck because they feel like they have to pay attention to those thoughts, or that they have to get rid of those thoughts. They have to get rid of that thought of heaviness. And instead, if we can learn to just be sort of amused by it when it comes up, oh, look, the mind is telling me I can't do it once again, and just seeing it as just another concoction. Ashandal will often say that, we have to be like a scientist, that a scientist observing sort of an experiment. The scientist doesn't have any judgment towards what they're observing. They're just sort of trying to observe it, and take it in and understand it, and not fix it, but just see it and know it. And in the same way, when that, and it's, this is a challenging place to work, because it's thought, but it's also the hindrance of doubt, which can be difficult. But the way through it is simply to see it and see, oh, look, the mind is having that thought again. And in that moment of seeing it without any judgment, without saying, oh my God, got to get rid of this heaviness, but just saying, oh, look what the mind is doing now. In that moment, awareness is already kind of separate from it. And I think, what you may find is the less we try to fight it, we just sort of make it, grist for the mill in our practice. Is this is just a phenomenon that's happening now, and it's as valid as any other phenomenon that ever happens, that it can very quickly become much later. Right? It's just phenomena, and it's as valid as any other phenomenon. You know, and you're the scientist just watching the phenomena. You know?
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. Rajni is saying, I am an emotional person who instantly melts with nature, trees, sky, mountain, rivers, birds, deep music, meeting, listening, enlightened masters. With awareness practices, I become very quiet and withdrawn from the world around. Moreover, according to my master, that for females, dance in totality, music, etc., is more suitable for their sadhana or their practice, as they are more heart-oriented practices. So I'm not sure whether I'm going in the right direction by taking up this practice. Kindly enlighten me.
Not sure. How would you can you boil it down for me? Because you broke up a little bit too, so I was having a hard time.
So basically, it's also in the chat, by the way. But what she's saying is that she's been told that, and also in her experience, that women should take up a more heart-oriented practice, things like music and dance and being in nature, and that's probably a little bit more suited for women. That's something she's heard. With awareness practice, she's finding she's becoming more quiet and withdrawn. And she's wondering if this is the right approach for her, because she melts very easily in nature with music, with mountains and rivers and birds. So she's wondering if a more heart-oriented practice is suitable for her.
Well, I mean, the goal of Buddhist practice is to free oneself from suffering, right? And I know not everybody there is Buddhist, and when I say suffering, you know, in the Buddhist sense, it doesn't mean pain. You know, of course, everybody experiences pain. It's what it means in the Buddhist sense is I am not okay with it. You know, I want this. It's beautiful stuff. I like. You know, bring it on. Pain, loss, all those stuff. Get it away from me. I don't want it. And death, I don't want it. I don't want to die. So I don't know how. You know, there's nothing wrong with obviously there's nothing wrong with nature. I mean, the monks in Thailand love to practice in the forest, you know, and it's, I mean, been a long-standing tradition since the time of the Buddha. And there's nothing inherent, you know, wrong with music and anything else, but I don't see how that is a pathway to liberation. Right? The pathway to liberation is seeing that is finding some independence from things. The Buddha said learning to sort of be an island unto oneself, and that sounds negative, and it sounds you know, like a depressed sort of existence, but it's not really. It's learning to see that my heart doesn't have to be tied to things out there. And that's really the bottom line is we don't have to tie our heart to and make it sort of subject to the vagaries of life, you know. So yeah, I think, I mean, this is the only way that I can see how to do it, you know, to be aware of how the mind is tying itself, it's tying its happiness to this, to that, and seeing that there's an innate happiness that isn't dependent on anything else. And that's the real sort of treasure we're trying to find, is that innate happiness. It's already there, but it's kind of covered over. But that innate happiness is not dependent on anything else. As far as like becoming withdrawn, you don't have to be withdrawn. I mean, I don't think I'm withdrawn, you know, necessarily. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe a little bit more than I used to be when I was young and crazy, but you know, I have relationships. I have a family. I you know, I actually just retired from my therapy practice. So I thought, you know, I work with people all the time. So you don't have to be withdrawn. So I don't. So that's a different. I think that's a different sort of point that's getting kind of confused in there. You know, there's a question of why are you feeling withdrawn, and that's one question, but the path to liberation then is I think a different question. I don't know that.
Wonderful. So thank you, Michael. I know you have a hard stop at this time. So if you like, we can end here if you want to say anything. And if you do have a few more minutes, I can ask you. There are, of course, many more questions, but as you like.
Yeah, I can have. Yeah, I can say a few more minutes.
Okay,
Yes.
so then there's a question about the stages of practice. You touched upon the different stages one reaches through this practice. Can you elaborate on these stages once again? And the time it takes to reach these stages generally.
Mm-hmm. So in the beginning, it feels frustrating. I mean, for me, it did too. I started out in Chan meditation, and which is Chinese Zen meditation, and I could go to a very I was very serious. You know, I've always been very serious about my practice, and I could get my mind into a very calm and clear state, and it felt good. You know, it felt good, and it was kind of self-rewarding to experience that calmness. But I didn't. It didn't change me. You know, when I get off the cushion and go to work, I get just as frustrated as I always did. And when I met these monks, what 30 years ago, they really made an impression on me, the way they taught, and I knew what they were saying was true. And so when I took up this practice, it's not like the kind of positive feedback you get from like concentration practice. It's you know, the mind is always thinking, and you get lost in the thought and you come out of it, and it goes right back to thinking. You get lost in the thought and you come out of it, and you keep doing that, and it can feel tedious in the beginning. But if you just have enough faith just to hang in there with it, the length of time you're spending in thought starts to decrease. So instead of being lost in a story for 10 minutes, maybe you're just lost in a story for 1 minute, you know, or whatever, you know, then maybe much less than that. And then the first major stage we come to is stage called Rupnan, which I think I referred to briefly in my talk, where where awareness at the start of practice, thought comes up and awareness goes into the thought. And awareness is looking out at our life, at the world through the sort of lens of thought. That's how we live our life, you know, before coming to this practice. Awareness is always sort of embedded in the thought and looking at the world through the lens of that thought. So some people are looking at the world through a lens of hatred, you know, or Luang Tien use a simile of a room, you know, that if you're inside of a room. When you're inside of a room, all you can see is the room. You can't, you know, you have to go outside of the room to see beyond the room. And so there's all sorts of rooms we create for ourselves: anxious rooms, angry rooms, fearful rooms. The normal, you know, without practice, awareness is always going into this one room or another, and in the beginning stage of practice, we're just continually pulling it out, coming back to the body. If you just keep doing that, even though it seems like it's repetitive and nothing's changing, one day it'll change, and awareness will all of a sudden it'll be outside of thought. And it'll just be observing the body and mind. it'll see the body moving, it'll see the mind will still have thought, but it's not inside the thought. And it doesn't, so the thought doesn't proliferate or make or cause us any suffering. It's just like a chatter, just kind of chattering away, and awareness doesn't care about it. It's just observing it. So that's the state of Rup Nam. We've seen Rup means form or body, Nam is mind or mental phenomena or non-physical phenomena. So when you reach that stage, then you kind of see, oh, I see that this is, you get some, your faith gets validated to a certain extent. And then we can practice a little more deeply too, because it's easier to watch the body and mind going about their business. I mean, that's the sort of feeling about the Rup Nam. Awareness is just watching the body and mind going about their business, and it's not getting worked up about it. An aside, the story of the Buddha's awakening, I have my own sort of unique take on it, I guess. The Buddha, he left home and spent 6 years going through all sorts of ardent sort of self-mortifying practices of deep concentration, not eating, or eating just grass and walking around naked, and these deep mortification practices. And he was sort of at the end of his rope when Sujata, this young woman, offered him some milk and rice gruel, and he took it, and then he had the memory of sitting under a rose apple tree as a child and watching his father in the field, working in the field. And he said, and he remember feeling very peaceful at that time, and said, maybe this is the way. And then he sat under the Bodhi tree, and he awakened that very night. So I think the whole moral of that story is more important than people sort of realize, because that whole sort of story of his journey towards liberation. He spent 6 years beating his head against the wall because he hadn't found the right sort of way to approach practice. And then he had that aha, oh, I remember as a child sitting there just, under this tree watching, and maybe that's the way. And then he got enlightened that very night. And for me, I see that as sort of a metaphor that sitting under the rose apple tree and watching and seeing this father in the field, I can imagine that you can just imagine the young Siddhartha sitting under the tree, and there's all this activity going on because he's the prince, so there's probably lots of people around, and people maybe are planting in the fields and doing this and that. But it's not his, he has no axe to grind with any of that. He's just sitting there watching it. That's it. Just sitting there watching it. He's not saying, why are they planting that? Or that guy's not working hard enough. He's just sitting observing it. And not, and I think that is the perfect metaphor for our practice. The field is this body and mind. So we learn to just, the path, the practice is to sit in a comfortable way and just observe the body and mind without saying, why is it doing this? Why is it doing that? Because that's what we normally do, right? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? We just observe it, And so with back to the state of Rup Nam, the state of Rup Nam is that becomes really clear. Awareness is under the rose apple tree, just watching the body and mind. And if we continue, the other major stage of practice, 1.10 really had 2 major stages. There's the stage of Rup Nam, and the other is called Paramat. And so Paramata means touchable by the mind. And And that is in opposition to what's called samut or samuti, which is supposition. So what that means is, so paramata is anything that the mind can touch directly in the present moment. The mind, sensation in the body, visual object contacting the eye, a sound contacting the ear, thought as a phenomena, not as a story, but thought as a phenomenon that comes up. These are paramat. Samuti, supposition, is the label or concepts. So it's the labels we put on things. It's all the assumptions that the mind automatically piles on our experience. So, I mean, this is kind of, I think I have a little prop here. So in our practice, and this isn't just in Mahasati, but Mahasi Sayadaw also says that, it's important to know the difference between phenomena that can be touched directly by the mind in the present moment, that isn't a concept, it's not an idea, it's an actual phenomena that I can contact, and supposition. So like Michael is a supposition, just a label, a name. You can't contact Michael. You can maybe touch this physical body, but you can't contact Michael because it's just a supposition, just an idea. And in insight meditation practice, all insight meditation practice, really, we try to keep sort of coming back to what is touchable in this present moment. And in that way, we start to be clear about, what is really paramat, what is really touchable in the moment, and what is something that's being added by the mind. So back to the stage of paramat, Ashandav sometimes would use this kind of metaphor. He'd say that he'd use he would say that this meditation gong represents the mind, and this represents a sense object that contacts the mind through one of the sense doors. So it could be a visual object, or it could be a sound, or it could be a thought arising in the mind. So when it contacts it, it creates this reverberation, right? And in the same way, when a sense object contacts the mind, it creates a reverberation that happens. So there's samuti, there's a label that gets put on it. There's the assumptions that go along with that. You see a monk. There's a label that there's a monk. Then there's all the assumptions about what it means to be a monk, and then maybe there's some thoughts about, I don't know if I know that guy or not. So when a sense object contacts the mind, there's all this reverberation that happens. But the point is that this isn't what, in this case, what is it we are attaching to? Are we attaching to this piece of wood, or are we attaching to the reverberation? Right? We attach to the reverberation. I mean, all of our attachment, all of our dukkha is because the mind is, it's not that the mind is attaching to the objects that can contact to the sense door, it's that the mind is attaching to its own reverberation. So in the state of paramat, we see that clearly. And when you see that I'm just being like a dog chasing its own tail, and that's how that we break the control that sense objects have over the mind. Sense object, this is nothing. This is just a stick, and that's what everything is, But we turn it into something when it contacts our sense doors. So that's the state of paramat, and that, then you really start to understand suffering, and you really start to see, oh, it's stupid to follow after. You get excited about my own concoctions, you know, and so and ultimately, you see the deeper truth. You see the profound truth that that really I can't really describe. But so, I hope that helps. And thank you so much for having me. So it's so inspiring to see, because there's so many people, they want to just sit still and watch their breath and feel good. And it can be a tough sell, it's so it's really inspiring for me to see so many people that have opened their hearts to it and are open to it. So thank you so much, Nitya, for all you're doing, and thank you, everybody, and to my friends in India, again, happy Independence Day. Yeah, thank you. Have a good night.
With them. I will share with them your website, Michael. And if there's anything else you want me to share with them, you can let me know later or now, and I'll pass that on to them. And I know you have many writings available on the website. Your articles are there and things. So I'll share that with everybody.
Yeah, just the website is Mahasati Meditation. Mahasati Meditation, no dot or anything, just mahasatimeditation.org. There's another site called mahasati.org, but that's a different site. But the one we have is mahasatimeditation.org. And I'd encourage people you can just join the mailing list, because I send out a monthly sort of Dhamma letter reflection, and there's also we're putting some more podcasts up there. Our Dhamma talks by Ashanda and Ajahn Nipen. So it's a good resource, and I think hopefully the Dhamma letters are a way to, you get a monthly letter to maybe remind you to keep practicing. So again, thank you, and have a
Thank you, Michael.
Take care.
So if you want to take a few minutes break, 3-4 minutes, and come back, we'll continue our practice. Very inspiring to have Michael with us and to get a chance to learn from his wisdom. And I think he also enjoyed being with all of us. So maybe he'll agree to come again. And yeah, we'll continue with our practice. I just share briefly what I found very helpful practicing with him. The sense of observing arising and passing in the body and mind as I was doing the practice. Feeling the movements, of course, feeling the awareness of being here now, and also feeling the arising and passing. This came up quite spontaneously in his presence. Arising and passing of sensations, arising and passing of feelings, arising and passing of thoughts. And I liked how he described the stages, at least the 2 major stages of the practice, which is Rup Nam. A lot of clarity. He's explained what is Rup Nam. And the Paramatta, which is also something he explained very nicely. What is directly touchable by the mind versus what is something that we suppose we get. And we tend to mix these 2 things up. We mix up concepts with our actual experience of reality. And that becomes clearer as we practice. So let us continue our practice, and then after a while, I know there are some more questions, some of which maybe I can also answer, and also happy to pass on your questions to him, and maybe if he has time, he might reply back and share the responses with you. Let's continue.